And we've known each other for a long time. 8 years ago, I went back and looked just recently. We did a on-camera interview, and you're really focused on building Fireline. You're making sure that the culture that the family created 3 generations ago continued on. You're focused on innovation and growth. And here we are now, 8 years later. You've made a decision and you've gone through a sale. I'm really curious on sort of the last 8 years, what they've been like in sort of the Fireline story from as far back as you want to take us to sort of where we are today.
Yeah, I was thinking about it on the way here. When I originally took over the business, it was 2010, right? It was late 2009, but really essentially early 2010. It was a different world. But I had just lost my father, so we were about 140 employees in the middle of a recession, and my father had just died, so I was looking, and I was 3rd generation, so I was looking at the business and, what do you think my motivation was at that point, right? It was to just keep it going because I was sad and I wanted to keep the thing that made my father happy going, and that was kind of the thing that was driving me forward. As you know, that doesn't last forever. Grief it fades over time, and then the thing that wasn't driving me as much, and then the thing that was driving me for a long time, probably about 8 years ago when we started talking, was a little bit of ego, right? A little bit of ego, like I wanted to prove that I could do it, right? That was a little bit of it. It was also, I think, I had this vision of what we could be, and I knew we weren't there yet, and so I was trying to reach that vision. And so a lot of my time was focused on that innovation and on that growth and whatnot. But a couple of years ago, a lot of that changed, and we kind of started to hit a lot of the things that I thought I was going to do, right? Like that was the big thing for me was I think we achieved a lot of my long-term plans and vision for the company. And when you suddenly achieved it, it's like, okay, do I want to start over and create another long-term plan, or is this as far as I'm going to take it? And so I think the difference between 8 years ago to now is we got a lot accomplished, and we did a lot, and I think I took it to where I knew I was going to be able to take it, and I was comfortable with that, and that was kind of where I felt like I needed to end it and pass it on to the next time we were going to kind of put it into place.
So you've probably reflected on this, but in these last few years, you've probably begun to reflect on sort of what have I learned, and am I different, and maybe would I do anything different? But what are the big lessons learned from your point of view? Operating a large organization.
Well, one of my key lessons I've learned, and I don't think I've mastered this, so I want to say that I'm not a master of it, is when to react and when not to react, right? I don't know if you've experienced this in your time, but there's a time for when you need to, somebody brings something to you and you need to take action right away. Yeah. And there's other times where you're like, that is very interesting, let me think on it, and then you're going to kind of sleep on it for a little while, or you're just going to put it on a parking lot somewhere and let it sit for a bit. So that knowing when to react and when not to react took time, and especially when to implement change and when not to implement change, like how to implement change. Big change needs to be kind of followed by a period of stability a little bit, because you got to kind of, if you keep throwing big change at people, it's overwhelming and you're going to lose people, you're going to see turnover. So I didn't get a master's in it, but I definitely got a bachelor's in change management, so to speak, during this whole process, how to manage that.
So a lot of folks that we deal with here at CCA, they sort of look at folks like you have gone through the process, and are there thoughts that you would have, and I know you're in peer boards, both in your industry and sort of in the geography. What do you share? What do you share that you learned sort of along sort of the decision to sell your company, and then, kind of the lessons that you can share with other business owners that are considering maybe a liquidity event?
I'm a big advocate for peer boards because I believe that, sharing your challenges with other leaders and they can help you with it is a massive tool for any leader. During that process, though, we have to go through annual strategic planning, right? We have to do our strategic plan for the year. Early on, I did this for 15 years. Early on, it was an annual strategic plan followed by, I also would pair it with like a 5-year long-term plan. I think in the early days, my long-term plans were a little too granular, a little too specific. I learned the long-term plan has to be more of a thought and of the direction that you're trying to take it. And I think what I learned was when I did my long-term plans, I had these like goals. We're going to hit this target. We would like to get into this market. We want to do these things. But I wasn't ever looking at it from a liquidity event kind of perspective, right? I wasn't looking at it from I'm looking to sell the business. And because I wasn't at the time, my intention was to take this for another 10, 15 years. Yeah. But the reality is you never know what's going to happen in those 5 years. And so I really feel like business owners need to, if they're going to create their long-term vision, their long-term plan, they still also need to mirror that to what it would look like if they did. Even if they're not planning to and they have no intention to and that's not the plan, You don't know 3 years into a 5-year plan what's going to change. But then beyond that, even if you're working towards that liquidity event, what are you doing? Ultimately, you're growing your EBITDA. You're trying to invest in top line growth getting into new markets and making sure that you're not investing too much with one client, putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Those are kind of actions that are going to be good for any business, regardless of whether or not you're going to sell. So it's just going to make the business stronger for me to reinvest in the business if I choose not to go a liquidity event. But a lot of my early long-term vision plans were spent working too much in the weeds and too much on just making the business better kind of subjectively and not financially. And I wish I had spent a little bit more time kind of steering in that direction. Because I think you told me, we were at a event where you were a panelist and there was the panel was talking. Yeah. And one of the things that hit home for me was you don't start selling your business 3 months before you sell your business. You start selling your business 3 years before you sell your business. Yeah. So if you're not taking your long-term vision and working it towards that plan, then you have to pivot midway and you don't have enough time to like get it where you need to get it once you make that decision.
Did you have any moments like sort of, you met, I know you met a number of potential investors, and did you have any moments where like, they might ask you questions like, oh yeah, we have that, whether it's what's in your pipeline or visibility into your financials or an HRIS that maybe you guys rolled in, or was there things that you did that sort of were building the company for the right reasons that then the investor community also said, hey, how about this? How about this? How about this? And you said, we got that. We got that.
Absolutely. There were times so I learned early on, like I said, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? How much of your business is invested with one client, right? How that can be dangerous. We did not have that. We used to have one really large client, but it was never more than 5% of our business, right? Okay. The infrastructure that we put in place, the technology, the cybersecurity, things that were mostly for me to sleep at night, so I didn't have to worry about it. Right. But that's really good because I know a business, as soon as they got bought out, they had a ransomware attack, right? Like, and no buyer wants to buy somebody that's going to have that risk. And the fact that we had certain security measures in place was like a checkbox, right? So I think we got lucky in some ways. There were some things that we just did that were obviously on an investor's checklist.
So you guys, you're in multiple states, you have kind of multiple lines of business, you have services, there's some reselling, there's a lot going on at Fireline. When you go through a sort of a sale process, it's handier if you have the leadership team sort of with you along the way. When did you decide to sort of let them know, those in the leadership team, and then, kind of what role did they play, and did you feel like you did that about right? I
do feel like I did it right. I was fortunate because I got a lot of advice on this. I asked a lot of questions because you kind of have to make sure your head and your heart are in the decision, right? Like my heart was in it. I knew I was like, it was time, but then mentally, is it the right time for me? And so I knew there was people I was going to have to bring in. And the advice I was given by a lot of people I talked to was, you are going to have to bring in certain individuals, right, but you don't want the company to know, right? And that was killing me. It was killing me because I'm a very open book.
Transparent business.
I'm super transparent. Yeah. I'm all about transparency. And so to have to like hide that from the employees was so stressful. And, but we know, like a deal can fall through. And then if your deal falls through, then the employees are just left with a bunch of uncertainty. So you really can't tell them. So it was like, who can you tell and who do you need to tell? So I brought in 2 head of operations and a head of sales. And that was really important for me to have them sitting with me at the table, bought in, because ultimately I still want their feedback and their buy-in, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to have to be living with the next company and that are going to be executing the plans. And so I was very fortunate. We all agreed. We were all on the same page. It wasn't like I liked one company and they liked a different one. We were all like, this was the company to beat from day one. We all synced up. So I brought kind of in head of ops, head of VP, partially to help me with the actual process, because there's a lot of paperwork you got to get, and partially because I wanted their buy-in on who the next owner was. And then they were brought in probably really, they knew that was the direction I was going to go for about 2 years, but we didn't really kind of get that information out until probably 6 months before. And then closer to the deal closing is when finance had to come in and assist. So I had about 4 individuals who were in the loop. But thankfully, it was nice because I had so few people I could talk to about it. Yeah. You need that sounding board. But also you need that support for the diligence process. It's very key.
That was my next question. It was really around sort of, were there things in the process? And you mentioned diligence. And it's nice having a team because you can kind of split that workload up.
Yes.
Was there things that you thought, oh my God, if I have to answer that question again?
So Katie from your team she kept trying to tell me, like, it's really tough. The quality of earnings is tough, and the diligence is tough. And I'm like, I know, but like, look at how good my paperwork is. Yeah. I'm going to be great. We're going to be fine. I'm not going to have any. In the back of my mind, I was really cocky about it because I really did think that like it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I knew it would be hard work and it would take time, but I felt like we got all this. No, I don't think that. I think my lesson I learned is that you can never be prepared for diligence.
Yeah.
Because there are questions that you're like, but I thought I answered that already. And they're like, well, we want to divide it in this way, right? It's taking the data and carving it up into 6 different ways so that they can analyze it from 6 different angles. And oof, man, it was a lot. So what we did is we kind of had, if it was customer database, my ops person really was the key person on that. Financials, I actually pulled in my retired VP of finance, which was amazing. She was just a blessing, and because she could work full time on this, and she did all the financial and the accounting side of it. I was like all the legal diligence, the history, the org charts, the HR side of it, and then I had my sales guy kind of helping me with a lot of the sales information and commission plans and strategies and market placement. And it was very helpful to divide it up. I wouldn't want to go too deep into a big group knowing. I think it's keeping that kind of concise of somebody's got ops, somebody's got sales, somebody's got finance, and somebody's kind of got the catch-all, which is usually the owner. That was really a good division. I felt like any deeper than that would have stressed me out having too many people know.
We talked about it just a little earlier, is sort of the longer you can begin to think about, where you're going to take the company in terms of liquidity. One of the things that I know you kind of went through with us was a strategic assessment. And that has a valuation built in and maybe some marketability study and maybe who potential buyers are. Was that helpful? How'd that sort of color your decision-making process? I think it's probably a year before you ended up going to market.
I had spent all of 22 not saying out loud what I was thinking, right?
Yeah.
Which was, I think I need to go this direction.
Yeah.
And so I internalized it for about a year. And then I spent all of 23 researching. And I felt like 23 was let me subtly ask questions from my business peer board, and I went to sit and watch that panel.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I think I took like 12 pages of notes at that panel very subtly in the back row. That was my research year, and I really wanted to understand what's the right way to go to market. But then I needed to understand what is my business marketable. And so that's where the strategic assessment came in. And I think, I got a valuation. As you know, we did far better than what my valuation was.
Right.
That was really, that valuation was kind of a wake-up call of, oh, you need to get your act together. You need to get this together. I think what we didn't anticipate was how competitive the market was when we finally hit the market. But the thing that it really hit home for me was, so all of us business owners have like weak spots, right? We have little blind spots. No, I know, shocking.
Yeah.
So for me, on a financial side, I can dance around the P&L and I can live in that world. The P&L, the income statement, that is my baby, right?
Yeah,
I live in that all the time. Me and the balance sheet aren't always friends.
Okay.
Me and the balance sheet are I'm like, hey, balance sheet, I see you over there, but I just don't pay that much attention to it. And when you're selling your business, the balance sheet's very important.
Yeah.
And so I got a little 101 course in networking capital. That was that's a very key metric that I paid zero attention to prior to doing that strategic assessment, and understanding our cash flow and understanding our debt. And that was a lot of things that I was like, I don't have to worry about those because we're doing okay over here.
Yeah.
But when you're going to sell your business, that balance sheet is really key. And that really was a wake-up call for me, was to get that understanding of that.
Yeah.
Charlie and Katie did a really good job of explaining that.
I think if I have to explain networking capital one more time, it'll be the 58,000th time I think I've explained it to.
Because it's not something we pay attention to.
As an operator, you don't think of it. You think of cash flow. You know whether you can make payroll and things like that, and can I make this investment? But it's the concept that investors think of constantly because they have to have an enterprise that's going to be able to run. Once they invest in it,
right.
And they don't want to invest any more money to make it run. But it is a concept that most folks struggle with. So you're in good company.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not alone then. That was a wake up call. I was like, I actually went and studied back afterwards and did a bunch of research on trying to wrap my head around networking capital and how can I calculate it, or how can I ask my finance person to help me calculate it without her asking questions.
Yeah. We sold a company once, and I was the operator. And we were short. We're going to be short on the capital stack. So it was a private equity group that came in and acquired us. and we were short with the founders. We weren't going to make their number. And one of the young private equity guys said, well, we can fill this in with mezzanine financing. And I was a 30-year-old computer scientist running my first company. I didn't even know what mezzanine financing was.
I don't know what mezzanine
So
finance
I
is.
thought, what are we going to the ballpark to get money, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that's important to do is to sort of learn these concepts, because we don't use them, you know?
Well, that's right.
And so it's part of our job and those in our profession
Yes, to educate
communicate
us.
that, you know, and educate that.
That was key. And then I think that's, like I said, it's that whether we think we need to know about this stuff or not, we should be looking at EBITDA, right? We should be looking at things that are, if you ever did want to go to a liquidity event, because even if you don't, it's still going to be good for your business. It's still making your business healthy. So that you can sustain things like, oh, I don't know, a pandemic or other things, right? Like those are the kind of things that make you a little bit safer. That strategic plan was about a year before, maybe it wasn't a year, maybe it was like 6 months before I kind of officially signed up and was like, I want to go down this path. But it was a little more than a year before we closed. It was kind of the beginning of what I knew was going to be a process that I wanted to go through. But I just wasn't ready to jump in 2 feet yet. So that assessment was a good way for me to kind of get a couple months to digest the information and figure out, can I do this? Can I start building value? And honestly, I'm very proud of what we did and how we accomplished it. But I spent 23 researching and also slowly starting to nudge my company in the right direction in terms of financials. Because I did a ton of investing in the business, but not enough thinking about how to make the business valuable. That was a wake-up call for us. It was 2022. It was the end of 22, and it was when the job market went bonkers. Remember when everybody was I was losing technicians left and right. People were leaving. And I lost a bunch of technicians to the government and to some competitors offering them crazy pay rates. And I had a handful of technicians say to me, they were like, well, we love this company and we love it here, but it's a lot of money. That was the wake-up call for me, that I can make it as nice as I want, but if we're not profitable, that I can invest in high-level talent, then I'm doing myself a disservice. So I started going down that path in 23, but then in 24, as we were going through the sale process, all the things we had put into place prior started hitting, and it made an impact on our EBITDA dramatically, which was great for us, and the timing worked out. So timing's key too, right? We were talking about that earlier. Like, you just never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we're in the time where we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, especially now. But then I think in addition to that, my market's consolidating, and it's a fragmented industry. It's consolidating. It's just going to happen. And so I had to make that decision. One of the reasons I made the decision was, I had to make sure my head and my heart were in it. It was the right time. I got it as far as I could take it, but also the buyers that I worked with, they like to call it like getting a dance partner. They're like, everybody in your industry is getting a dance partner right now. You do not want to be the one left without a dance partner.
When the music stops.
You want to have a chair to go to. And so I really realized, I was like, whether I like it or not, the industry is consolidating. It was just another sign that the time was happening. I mean, we were getting 5 phone calls a week, maybe I would get from PEs, private equity. It was up to 5 phone calls a day. I mean, it was incredible.
Well, we're thrilled about the outcome.
Yeah.
Thrilled for you personally,
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming in and chatting with us. This is great.
Thank you.
8 years from now, we'll schedule a time.
I know, we'll have to do it again.
Wherever we are.
That'll be a whole nother life at that point.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Marty.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.